Yeah, I don't think that we're succeeding this. Let me give you an example. I heard a story recently about a Spanish-speaking roofer that went to get a building permit in the city of Sacramento. And they said, "Do you have an appointment?" I said, "No." "You have to go online. Do you have your phone?" I said, "No." Fellow barely spoke English. This is our future, our workforce, our small businesses. We need to make sure we serve them whatever language they speak, whenever they show up at City Hall. They can't always come on a Tuesday between 10 and 4. If they're showing up to fill out their paperwork and pay the bill, we need to help them. I don't know all the answers, but what I'll do is work with the community and say what's lacking. What do we need to do to help entrepreneurs and businesses basically access resources, whether they're state, federal, local. The city of Sacramento is the pulse of government. We go out in the community on a daily basis. We need to make sure that we represent all communities.
Thank you. We'll move to the next question. This is about the youth in Sacramento, and it will first go to Richard. Do you believe the city of Sacramento has a role in youth civic engagement, specifically benefiting the Latino youth community? Please explain.
Certainly the city has a very important role in engaging our youth. As a pediatrician and a parent, I know how important it is that our youth are supported and they have the opportunity to engage in the civic process. After all, our youth who are going to be our future voters. We should be investing in our youth. That is why I work as a physician to get doctors out into the community to work with neighborhood associations to help support our youth. And also to engage the youth themselves in decision making. For example, I actually did a bill where it was actually sponsored by youth themselves, that they were actually the sponsors of the bill. And it was an opportunity to teach them about civic engagement. We need to do much more of that, and certainly at the city of Sacramento, we have a tremendous opportunity. I'm proud to be endorsed by Senator Angelique Ashby, who was in City Council. She created a youth action court that helped engage youth. That's what we need to do across the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose.
Yes, the answer to this question is yes. I was part of a youth program back in San Isidro. It was a kids rec center area where we basically would go right after school and we learned how to play different sports. That's why I learned how to play soccer. But the important piece of that was a safe haven for us. It was the city recognized that there is a large drug and gang influence in that area in San Isidro and throughout the city as well. And the community created a center so that the youth can keep themselves safe from the influence from the outside world and ensure that those young individuals stay pure at heart and ended up going to fulfill their dreams. Right? Many of my fellow classmates went on to play soccer, football, baseball, college. Those are opportunities that were created through that youth program. But some of my other fellow neighbors in the same neighborhood went the opposite way because they weren't part of the programs. So I firmly believe that we should invest in the future, in our youth and the generation.
Thank you. Flo.
I'm firmly committed to making sure that young people in our city have a future, and especially our Latino youth. I supported both Measure G and Measure L, which were the youth funds for Sacramento that passed and that was pushed forward by SAC Kids First. But I also made sure that we championed making sure there was a seat on boards and commissions for youth who are 16 to 24. And when I visited New Tech High School earlier this year and had conversations with the students there, one of the things they talked about was that summer at City Hall, they didn't feel welcomed. And I don't want young people to have their first experience with governance and it not be a great one. So I want to make sure that we're preparing students who are coming in and who are interested in serving to have a good experience, whether it's on our boards and commissions, whether it's through the partnerships that we have with schools, or whether it's through the programs that we're hosting at City Hall. That is incredibly important because that is a way for us to invest in our communities while also making sure that we have a next generation of leaders who have an opportunity to be a part of our city's governance.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yes, thank you. As I said in the intro, housing, homelessness, and youth, those are my 3 top priorities. I often say, it's not my line, but youth make up 50% of the present, 100% of the future. If you have fewer kids in our juvenile justice system, invest in our youth today. It's been my life's work. The legislature, I wrote the law to have universal preschool and after-school programs for all families regardless of income. It is so key that we focus on the future. We're counting on them to make sure that they help us as a society. But more importantly, it makes our communities safer. We want to reduce gun violence, focus on our youth. We want to focus on economic development, focus on internships and opportunities for young people to get exposure to careers and business. That's a priority I think the city can do in our after-school programs, our summer partnerships, making sure we properly allocate our cannabis tax money. It'll be a big priority for me as mayor of Sacramento.
Thank you. Steve?
As the father of 2 young boys, the cost of daycare is completely unaffordable, and the city has to do more to make sure home-based daycares, which are largely run by women of color, have the opportunity to succeed. Second, the city runs 4th R, and 4th R partners with the school districts so that after-school care and before-school care, so parents can work, is intact. And we have to expand 4th R. The slots are too limited, and they're not at enough sites. That is essential. The partnership with our schools are run separately, but the city has the kids every hour they're not on campus. So making sure that their neighborhoods are safe, and that if they want to do sports, soccer or football, that they find an opportunity to learn the discipline, the teamwork, and the skills that will help them later in their life. And that leads into jobs, arts, science, technology, and we need to help make sure that the wraparound opportunities for young people like me, when I was 14, I started working, are there for our generation and the next.
Thank you. We'll go to the next question that will first be directed to Jose. Environmental justice is a state-mandated element of all project developments. How do you see your role as mayor to implement this mandate that positively affects the Latino community and their neighborhoods?
This is a great question. Just the conversation today, earlier, about some of the problems that we're facing here in South Sac. Our community is not protected equally as some of the other communities. Some of the effects that the industrial industry is, their byproducts are filtering into this community and affecting us, to the point that the community has to rise up and put in their own air collecting devices to try to see what the AQ is. That's a problem. If the community itself has to stand up and protect itself, that's an issue. And you need to make sure, as the mayor, you are standing up for everyone equally, ensuring that every community is represented, but also reaching out to those other communities that surround us as well, and working with them to ensure what they're doing is not affecting us over here. And if they're affecting us, then we need to make sure we're standing up to them and holding them accountable as well. Because if they're polluting our air over here and it's affecting us and creating health concerns within our community, that's an issue, and that's an issue I'll take on.
Thank you. Flo?
We live in this community, and so the first step of policy is to mandate something. But often we forget that's not the last step. We actually have to implement the policies that have been passed. And so just because there's a state mandate doesn't actually change anything until we actually allocate money and resources to implement. And so that's my commitment to you as your next mayor, is that I'm not going to take state mandates lightly. I'm actually going to implement them and have a plan for how we allocate resources to make sure that we can afford the air quality monitors, that we are actually taking pieces of our climate action plan and putting them into place, that we're protecting our environment on a regular basis. Because we know that our kids develop asthma when we are in places with poor air quality. We know that when we don't have adequate shade and we're in heat islands, that it affects our health and our actual life expectancy, the number of years we live. That's not something to be taken lightly. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I know this because policies failed to protect my own family. So I am deeply committed to making sure that we implement policies and not just read them.
Thank you. Kevin?
I'm proud of my record on climate change, but really focusing on climate justice and environmental justice. You know, that's an issue that we know. Communities of color and low-income communities are more likely to be next to the incinerators, the solid waste facilities. That was in my old city council district. I saw it first and foremost. What I would do as mayor is make sure that our policies we implement focus on the areas most at need, like transportation. You look at today's Sacramento Bee, the hot spots where there are pedestrian deaths. They're not in Land Park on Freeport, not in East Sac on Folsom. They're in the poorest communities of Sacramento. Those are communities that we need to clean their air, but we also need to make sure they have a safe place to be able to ride their bike, to go to work, go to the doctor, take care of their family. So I would make sure that we focus on the areas most at need. Lastly, as an effective state lawmaker, I would help to draw down more money from the state capitol to serve our needs, including our climate justice needs.
Thank you. Steve?
Environmental justice is extremely important. I served 8 years on the Air Quality Board. I chaired it. I actually worked with Assemblymember McCarty during the big fires so that our kids could be kept inside, that our air pollution control officer, Alberto Ayala, could have the power to ensure that workers who had to be outside or people who are unsheltered could come in. We have to make sure that all of our systems, as we adapt to new realities with fire and flood and adversity, are better. I proposed Vision Zero because too many people are dying in disadvantaged neighborhoods. Just like I mentioned Jorge, who was the cook at Cafe Soleil, killed on Freeport Boulevard. Every day throughout the city, but mostly in our disadvantaged communities, people trying to walk or bike, they can't do it. There aren't sidewalks, there's a telephone pole there, the streets are unsafe. We have to make sure that each one of these threads are pulled together into making sure that we have an effective safety net so that everyone can live healthy and happy lives.
Thank you. Richard?
As a pediatrician and public health expert, I certainly understand the impact, and I see that in my clinic, of what happens when we don't have environmental justice. And we know that this, unfortunately, things like poor air quality, and actually increasing heat, and heat's a killer, and disproportionately impact disadvantaged communities, and fortunately that also includes the Latino community. But we also need to think about how do we continue to create more opportunities as well. So for example, they started out saying that, well, we're dealing with a problem with not enough people, not enough housing, right? We have too many people who are unhoused, all right? And that includes a lot of Latinos who are unhoused as well as many others. So we need to increase the production of housing, and particularly infill, so that people aren't having to drive long distances, because that again contributes to poor air quality. We also we need to be sure that people being on the streets is not something that is conducive to their health or to environmental justice as well. So that's why my top priority is to address the issue of homelessness and public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go on to the next question, if someone can pass out cards, if you're interested in writing out a question, we just have time for probably a couple at the end, but we want to hear from you. So if you'd like a card, please raise your hand and they will be delivered to you along with a pen. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. This question will first be directed to Flo. And this is on engine emissions. Under the engine emissions program, transition from gas to electric motors for equipment used in landscaping is now required. How will you help this industry transition and lessen the impact on Latino and other workers?